Morning, ladies and gents. Simon Brown here for our Talking Stock on Wednesday. This week, we're going to be looking at ETF SENS announcements. ETFs, of course, exchange traded funds. SENS, Stock Exchange News Service. There are certain requirements that all listed companies and products on the JSE need to adhere to in terms of communicating with investors or potential investors or those doing research, and they do so via the Stock Exchange News Service. You find it within online share trading on the home page. You'll pick it up at a number of independent media sites. MoneyWeb has it, ShareNet has it, and others. So it's available out there. But there's a bunch I want to go through in terms of what exactly we are looking at and the like. If you've got questions, drop those questions in. We've certainly got time. I'm looking here. I picked Satrix 40. You could have picked any one of potential, of the ETFs, but they had all the different ones that are particularly needed for the purpose. So of course, stock code, sources, SENS, the date that it was issued, and the headline to it. So let's click through listing of additional, and you'll see that this is apart from partial delisting, and we'll come to that in a moment. Listing of additional Satrix 40 securities is the most frequent SENS announcement coming out of them. And what they're basically saying is, understand the distinction between how a unit trust is created and how a ETF is created. Unit trust is created pretty much daily on the fly. So, the unit trust manager sees that people want X number of units, and they then issue those units. And typically that is done end of day because it's an over-the-counter process. It's not exchange traded. So they get, million rand flowing in, and the units are rand each. So they need to create an additional million units, and they create it on the fly and will go and buy those individual stocks, in ratio that they have in their particular fund. They could change weightings. Let's say they've already got 10% in a certain stock, and they get more cash in, and that drops it to say 9%, and they're like, that's cool, we're going to take that money and put it somewhere else. It's at the manager's discretion, but there are rules as to how much cash they can physically be holding, so they are constantly, in essence, creating and deleting those units. ETFs are different. What an ETF does is they create a bunch of them. And in this case, the SENS from 13 November, so from Friday, they've created an additional 400,000 securities. In other words, the ETF Satrix 40, which will trade from commencement of business, that is 13 November, and the issue price 52.75. And then they tell you that there are now 164 million Satrix 40 ETFs in place. So all that happened is that probably the day before, Satrix were like, okay, we need, the demand is there. We have basically almost sold out of those ETFs that we're currently holding. So they go and buy all the shares that make up that index. They buy them in the weightings for that ETF, and they've now got another 400,000 to sell. Remember, there is a market maker in the market who is on behalf of Satrix, who's constantly there buying and selling at a fair value price. So they're there making sure that everything's running cool. And what they need is they need to be able, they need equity ETFs to sell. If they don't have, they can't sell. Now, they're also buying back. At this point, they're obviously a net seller. And it doesn't influence price, because remember that market maker keeps the price. Say the fair value was 52 Rand and 75 cents as a fair value. They would be selling, for example, at 52 Rand 90 and buying back at 52 Rand 60. And as that fair value moved to say 53 Rand, they would be sellers at 53.15 and buyers at 52.85. So as that fair value is moving up and down in real time on the market, they are adjusting their buy and sell prices. And you can get other people buying and selling in between the market maker. The market makers at their fair value plus a little bit either side, but somebody else, they might be selling at 52.90, but you might be selling at 52.80. You might be selling at 52.60. So they are constantly creating additional units and keeping that quantity updated in terms of how many that they've got. So that's the SENS that we're seeing most frequently. The flip side is the partial delisting. And this one often spooks people. And this one dated back in 15 June. And here, 200,000 Satrix 40 securities delisted from the JSE commencement of business on 15 June, following the redemption of 2 Satrix 40 baskets. Now, you can, if you own 100,000 Satrix, you can redeem the basket. In other words, you can go to Satrix and say, hey guys, I've got these 100,000 units. Can I please have the shares that underlie it? And then Satrix will then pass those shares over to you, because of course they hold them, because this is how an ETF works. They physically hold it. So in this case, it was because 2 baskets had been redeemed. The holder of those received the shares and did whatever they wanted with them. Now, they could have sold some of them, whatever the case is, they received the shares. Oftentimes, it's just that they've literally just been net buyers. There's a partial delisting on 27 May. Here was some more baskets being redeemed. So we're not seeing anywhere, at times you're just literally a net buyer of the ETF, and now you've got too much stock. Think of it like a retail outlet. There's a perfect number of whatever it is you sell, widgets, tins of beans, dresses, whatever it is. There's a perfect quantum that you want in stock. And if you start running low on stock, well, you order up some more. And if you start having too much stock, in the case of a retailer, well, they would start doing sales and the like. In the case of an ETF issuer, they simply start just doing partial delistings. More baskets being. So Satrix just seems to be getting hit with baskets being redeemed. It's baskets. So basically, it's people just redeeming baskets in it. But the reason I bring it up and why it's important, a lot of people see it and think, oh, what's happening? Satrix is going and delisting. They're going to. Nope. It's just they have a certain ideal number that they want. And the flip side is, listing of additional. This is not a supply and driven market. It's an ETF. There are market makers underneath, so no worries around that. So that's the big announcement, which we see a lot of coming through. The other one is your distribution and finalization announcement. This is obviously going to be on a quarterly basis as dividends are paid out. Now remember, Satrix 40 will be receiving dividends through the course of the year, different companies, different year ends, different pay dates, etc., etc. So they receive dividends. They then hang on to those dividends and pay them to you on a quarterly basis. They pass it through as dividend, but whilst they're sitting on that dividend, obviously it is going to be cash. It's been paid out, and they are going to receive some interest, which they will then pay through to you. So they will pay interest. There's no dividend withholding tax on interest, but interest is added to your income. There's an exemption from SARS, your first 23,800 if you're under 65, and 34,500 if you're over 65 of interest received is exempt from any tax. Above that, you add it to your income and pay income tax accordingly. So there's always going to be a tiny little bit of interest that's come through. In this case, it is a fraction of a cent, literally a fraction of a cent. It tells you the different dividends that they've received. So local dividend, foreign, and then where the foreign has originated from. And those all have withholding tax subject to them. So what they're going to say to you is, gross dividend, etc. And ultimately, they work that down in terms of the fees that are being, so the taxes that have been paid. Remember, when we receive it, there is no tax to be paid. Dividend withholding taxes, as suggested, it is withheld. Now, I'm going to go in a bit and I'll show you one of the, but let's go to it now quick. Signia does a lot more detail, which spooks a lot of people. So let's go look at, because what you'll see here, it's just nice and simple. Gross dividend, foreign dividend withholding tax, SA dividend where applicable, boom, 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 and so it goes. Signia actually tells you what their fee is, and I hope they're still doing it on this one. Distribution finalization announcement. Distribution, less portfolio costs. So what Signia does is they indicate what the portfolio cost is, which is the total expense ratio. And people look at that as a percentage of the dividend and say, yo, that's giant, that's 3%, we're being ripped. No, that is the total fee. You should view that as the percentage of the ETF. Signia is just the one who put it as a line item. Many of the others, they don't put it as a line item. But where do these issuers, these ETF issuers, take their fees from? Well, they take their fees out of that dividend. That's essentially it. So that they don't get tracking error on the unit price to track it, and it will on those that don't pay dividends. For example, New Gold and the others. You will notice if you take New Gold, which is an ABSA ETF over the gold price. If you take new gold and you multiply the spot gold by the ZAR, there's a gap. And that gap is because that fund has been in existence for 10 plus years and there's been a fee taken out every year. Let's say the fee is 1%. It's not, but let's say it is. You've essentially lost a 10% fee over the decade, and therefore the current ETF will be 10% below that spot price. Remembering, of course, this new gold is 1% of an ounce, so it's much more smaller in terms of it's not a full ounce, it's 1%. You need 100 new golds to make 1 ounce. That's what I'm trying to say. So Signia puts a lot more detail into that. They'll also then obviously tell you the dates. There'll be LDTs, and sometimes they issue these announcements. Yeah, so this has been issued on the 9th of July, and if you hold it at close of business on the 14th of July, they go X dividend. In other words, if you buy it on the 15th or later, you won't receive this dividend. And then there is a recorded date and, of course, a pay date. And that's just telling you when you will get the cash and the like. Dividends are, they're small, but they start to stack up in time. So they do become fairly important. The other one that's quite interesting, and again, this depends on the underlying index, it's usually on a quarterly basis, is those indices get re-weighted. What you've got is, I mean, there are 40 stocks. In fact, I think there's slightly more because we've got 2 Investex. So there's 41. And then when Fortress was here, no, Fortress is no longer there. We also had Fortress A's and B's. So what it's just saying to you is, Barclays Africa had grown to 1.42% and now it's down to 1.16. So they're going to sell down a bit of Barclays. Anglo American has gone from 669 to 8.32. So they're going to go and buy up some Anglo Americans. If there are any deletions, the new number will be a 0. No deletions from the index, so no change. So no stocks got booted out, new ones added. And we can see that because if there were any deletions, the new weight comes in at 0. And just double checking that there's no new weights coming in at 0. You see some of them really, really tiny. No, my bad, Redefine. Redefine was at 0.29%, new weight is 0. Redefine has therefore been booted out of the index. So what came in Redefine's place? Something should have a weight. There we go. Exoro had a weighting of 0% and has now got a 0.61. So essentially, Exoro replaced Redefine in this index. Exoro with a weighting about twice what Redefine was. Redefine was 0.29. Exoro comes in at 0.61. So that's just keeping you up to date with the comings and goings within that index. This is typically, most indices do a quarterly rebalance. So it will be once a quarter, they will issue that SENS announcement. Again, it is a requirement that they do. And if the indexes are being balanced more or less frequently, then you're just not going to see it there. So then it'll be more frequent or less frequent. The other, which is important, is they have to publish their, nope, that's not what I'm looking for. They've got to, in essence, publish their results of how they are doing. And it's that one there, and I know because I checked earlier. So it just tells you all of them. And what it is, audited annual financial statements for the year end 31 December. And they're telling you, let me make that go away. They then publish the results. Now, in the case of Satrix, they have sent you to a particular page, and you can go and find those details. Let's follow the link and see if it's working. And they're just telling you, there it is, go to, and these are their results. And nope, this is not what I was looking for, investor information. I'm sure it's sitting here somewhere. I was hoping it would be easier to find. So let's go and grab a bunch. I know, for example, I don't want that. Come on. So suddenly I can't use a mouse. I think Core Shares does a much more detailed breakdown. Preliminary results for the Core Shares Smart for the year ending 31 December. There's what I'm looking for. And they tell you what their assets are, what they've grown over the year, accrued income and receivables, etc. And this is in Rand. So it is, they got in 71,000 cash and cash equivalents to their total assets to it, etc. So this is all just giving you details. And if we drill down, you'll see dividend income, interest income, all the different total incomes. And from there, then comes, from that comes their fee. So they took 653,000 Rand in 2019 for running this particular ETF. That's the management fee, distributions, and then profit loss after distributions, 48,000. Fair value losses, and then you get the change. Now, ignore 2018. There were some massive changes there with the fair values because they switched the fund. And this is an abridged one. You'll get more details. But again, you own it, so it's like a business that you own. You own the ETF, and it's only fair that you see where those bits and pieces are, where those numbers are, and what cash is moving in and out. So they disclose that they only do on an annualized basis. They're not doing it as frequently as some of the others are. Companies are doing it obviously on a biannual basis. And then what we have seen is changes, and the changes here, there's not going to be any on Satrix. It's the rebalancing. I'm going to see if the Ashburton is there, because they recently, so ASH, is it EQF is the new code for the Ashburton, I think. Yep, there's the code. Remember, Ashburton did a change. There we go. So EQF, they did the Barrett procedure amendments, distinct securities. So remember, they changed from where they had a collection of, they would literally own the 1,200 stocks, to now they just buy those 700. They buy the underlying 7 ETFs that cover the 7 regions, and those ETFs are then holding the stock. So it's just a much simpler process in many senses, and enables them to become a fund of fund. So of course, those announcements will be sitting there as well. So the key ones, I mean, the ones that interest me, most importantly, are the quarterly dividend announcements, what the dividend is, when it'll be paid, etc. And then the second one that interests me is those the rebalancing, which is also coming through on a quarterly basis on most of the JSE and in fact US indices rebalance quarterly. So those are the two that really stand out for me. The rest, the listing of additional, the deletion, partial deletion, etc. Passing interest, but not of masses. Fred, on the Satrix RAF, do you receive a dividend? But there's another transaction described as cash reinvestment, not necessarily the same amount. So the Satrix RAFI is a total return. And when we went from secondary tax and companies to dividend withholding tax, what they do is they pay out a part of the dividend so that you can pay the tax on it. So let's say they've got a R1 dividend to pay. They would pay out 20 cents in cash, and that is your tax liability, dividend withholding tax, and the other 80 cents they then reinvest. And that's why, because it's a total return index. Javen, where do you find the rebalancing info in the Satrix S&P 500 or NASDAQ? So Satrix will publish accordingly, but there will also be, you can dig around at the actual NASDAQ, or so the NASDAQ website, they will talk about the rebalancing on their website, nasdaq.com. And the S&P 500 is a S&P Dow Jones Global, so you would find the core details. They will replicate it, but if you're looking for that information in advance, because they're often telling you pretty much as it's happening. So if you're looking for that, for example, the news all over my Twitter stream this morning is that Tesla will go into the S&P 500. And now I can't remember the date. Is it 27 December or something? So we know that well in advance, but that won't be notified on the SENS on the JSE until that actually comes along. So you would go to Standard & Poor. It was actually S&P Dow Jones Global. Google that, you'll find their website, and nasdaq.com. They will obviously give their changes as well. In the JSE sense, the changes to the indices are also announced in advance, and they publish it on the JSE, on the SENS feed. So you'll see it on SENS. It'll come through. It's not tagged as Satrix 40 or anything. It's just the information in terms of, what stocks are in and out of the indices, new weightings, and that sort of information coming through on the data there. Ladies and gents, so that's JC Sense. Yes, we do this Wednesdays, and we are questions coming. Do we do this every Wednesday? Yep, and we will continue through to an end of the year, and then we'll be back on the 13th of January, which is a Wednesday. Mondays is Dinero, myself, Market Standard. We're talking markets, what's happening. Wednesdays is talking stock. I'm going to start dropping in, and I need to go chat to Dinero. So if she's listening, she hasn't heard this yet. I want to do a sort of think piece once a month as well with online share trading, which you would probably do, I suspect, in an evening, maybe a 5:30 or 6 o'clock on a weekday evening. We got to just work the logistics around that. All of these uploaded to YouTube. I typically stream them live, but something's happening. I updated to the new Mac OS on the weekend, and I can't get all my different pieces to work. I need to find out what's the problem and why that isn't working. But head to YouTube, search Standard Online Share Trading, and you will find all the details there. Ladies and gents, we'll park it there. My name is Simon. Everyone have a great week further. We'll chat again Monday, 10:30, and then, of course, Wednesday for another Talking Stock. As I always say, if you've got topics you want me to cover around sort of ETFs, markets, around the websites. I know some folks have asked us to do charting and WebTrader. Haven't forgotten that. Drop me a mail, simon@justonelap.com, and we will add that to our list. Cheers, everyone. Have a great day further.